This is my family tree. My family's ancestry traces back to my great-great-grandparents with a man named Francis Dias. Francis Dias was born in British Guiana in 1876. British Guiana, which is now the independent nation of Guyana, is located between Venezuela and Brazil on the eastern coast of South America. Francis's ancestors, like many Portuguese peasants, likely moved to the British colony to produce sugar, which was in high demand by Europe and the United States at the time. At first, Portuguese immigrants had low social standing and were considered non-white, but their hard work and the slave trade's influx of poor Africans helped them become socially accepted by the late 19th century. Francis Dias had this to write about Portuguese immigrants in the 1800s. They came buoyed with hope and expectation, seeking a new living, a new outlook, and perchance a greater future. Capitalizing on this, Francis Dias became the first ethnically Portuguese mayor of Georgetown, which is the capital of British Guiana. This is a picture of what it looked like at the time. Here is Georgetown today. Francis remained active in the community and its political life for several decades after serving as mayor, including founding the Dias Cup for local soccer teams, which you can see here. Francis Dias married a woman from British Guiana named Julia Gomes. Their son, Frederick Dias, was born in 1907. Julia Dias died a few years later. Francis would remarry. Frederick Dias became involved in the rum industry, which has been an economic staple of British Guiana and the West Indies for hundreds of years. The worldwide demand for rum and the sugar it is made from helped institute the Columbian Exchange trade pattern and greatly affected world history in doing so. In 1937, he married Marjorie Aileen Minns, a woman whose family was English and also lived in British Guiana. They are my great-grandparents. This is a picture of a young Aileen and her father Charles Minns taken in 1926. Their son Richard was born several years later in 1940. Later that year, Frederick Dias was killed in a fire at the rum distillery where he worked. Aileen met and married an American named Robert Harrison, who at the time was a surveyor in the Army Corps of Engineers. They were married on December 20th, 1942. During World War II, he was stationed in British Guiana to help clear land to make runways for airplanes. Bob met Aileen because she was working in the office at the military base. Like many other engineers in the American military during World War II, Bob was moved around the world to various army bases to develop land and increase America's presence in the regions. Bob stayed in British Guiana for the duration of the war, while Aileen and the 3-year-old Richard left for America. They stayed with Bob's relatives in Massachusetts. Bob rejoined them in 1945 after his tour ended. Francis Dias, meanwhile, was now an old man. He remained in Georgetown, British Guiana until his death in 1951. In the 1950s, British Guiana's government was being taken over by the People's Progressive Party, whose symbol you can see above. They had strong communist ties. At the time, it was common for weak South American governments to experience this. My other family members most likely stayed in British Guiana, but my family has no record of them. Many Portuguese who did leave British Guiana ended up in places such as Canada, Illinois, and Hawaii. We think that if they did leave, they are probably there. Richard grew up on America's East Coast and moved with his family to Maryland, where he met Gail Strauss in high school. Her family was German on her father's side and British on her mother's side. They had lived on the East Coast for as long as our family can keep record of. Richard and Gail got married in 1959 when they were both 19. They had 3 sons, including my father, Thomas Dias, who was born in 1963. Richard worked for a drafting company called Vitro during the 1960s and 1970s. Vitro needed Richard and his family to move around often for work. They moved to 5 different parts of America in 5 years until a job opportunity arose in Fullerton, California. This is typical of many people who moved to the Sun Belt at the time. Due to heavy government development during World War II, the region had a lot of job opportunity. Many people migrated to the southern regions of the United States after World War II in this way. This is a picture of what Richard Dias looked like at the time. Richard Dias and his family continued to live in Fullerton. Thomas Dias would later meet my mother, Eileen Kushner, and they got married in 1990. My sister and I were born in 1999 and have lived in Anaheim for the past 17 years. After retiring, Bob and Aileen Harrison stayed in Fullerton, California. They passed away about 10 years ago and lived to be about 92. Thank you for watching my family tree movie.